Hello all, this is Anis with you. Welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, we are going to create two projects. One REST API CRUD Server and a MVC API CRUD Client. First, let's see the demo of the projects which we are going to create in this tutorial. The right side project is API CRUD Server and the left side project is MVC API CRUD Client. Let's see the create action first. Click create new button, then enter the first name, last name, phone number and email address. Then when we click the create button, this form will be submitted to a API server. You can see the API server project status window in the right side bottom corner. Yes, the form is submitted now and the customer record is saved successfully. We are redirected to the index page. It looks like everything happened in one application. But it is not. There are two applications and the communication between the client and server happens through the REST API technology. And next we will see the edit action method. Actually, the edit action method uses the HTTP put request to communicate with the API server, whereas the create action method uses the HTTP post request to complete the action. Let's modify the phone number and press the save button to update the changes to the database through the API server. Perfect. The changes are updated successfully to the database, so the edit action is working fine. Next, we will see the details action. Details action method uses the HTTP GET request to retrieve the customer details from the API CRUD server. See, the record is successfully retrieved and displayed. Next, we will see the delete action. The delete action uses the HTTP delete request to remove the resource permanently from the API server. Press the delete button in the delete confirmation page. Perfect, the record is deleted now. So, all the CRUD methods are working fine. Let's see how the projects are made from the scratch. Start Visual Studio 2022 and then select create a new project from the side menu. After that, from here select ASP.NET Core Web API project template from the side menu. Then after, press next button. In here, give the name of the project as API CRUD Server and save this project in the C drive. After that, press the next button. In here, select the target framework as .NET 7.0 and leave the authentication type to none, and then set the checkbox labeled as configure for HTTPS as checked. After that, set the checkbox labeled as use controllers also to checked. Then set the checkbox labeled as enable open API support to checked. This is because we are not using any JWT security tokens as of now. Later we will add the support for JWT tokens. Then click the create button and wait for the scaffolding task to complete creating the project. In case if the publish dialog box prompts, click the cancel button. We are not going to publish this project now. Now open the Solution Explorer from the View menu and then expand the Controllers folder and open the Weather Forecast controller file. Notice this file. This has an annotation called as API Controller in the head of the class name. This makes the class as an API controller. And this class has only one method named get, and this get method is an API method, and this method also has a HTTP get annotation and API name is set as get weather forecast, so that this method can be accessed by calling by the name get weather forecast. Okay, now let's convert this application to an API CRUD server. Right click the projects folder and click add and click new item and select class as the item type and give the name as customer, this class is going to be the model for the customer table. Then press the add button. Now the customer class is created. In API solutions, you don't keep the class files inside the models folder. But if you wish, you can create a folder named as models and keep all our model 4 classes inside it. I'm just keeping my customer class in the root folder just to make the project as simple. Next, we need to add properties to the customer class file. Off the screen, I have added 5 properties to the customer class file, namely ID, first name, last name, phone number and email ID. Hope these properties are enough to create our API CRUD solution. Next, we need to install the Entity Framework core. So, go to Tools and select NuGet Package Manager and then select Manage NuGet Packages for Solutions. And here, click the Browse button. And then enter EF Core SQL Server in the search box. After that, select the Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.SQL Server. And here, check the API CRUD Server project and select the latest version of EF Core from the Version Select drop-down box. As of this recording, the latest version is 7.0.3 and click the Install button. In case if you are prompted with the Preview Changes dialog box, then click OK to proceed further. Then after, click the I accept button in the License Acceptance dialog box and wait for the installation to complete. After that, we need to create the DB context file. We will keep our DB context file inside the data folder. So let's create a folder named as data. Right click the data folder and select new item and select the class as the item type and give the name of the class as API DB context and press the add button. After that, inherit the class from the DB context base class. This DB context class is in the Entity Framework core namespace, so include this namespace in the using section. And then add the constructor method which will pass the options parameter to the base class. After that, add the dbset property for the customer class and name the property as customers. Then open the appsetting.json file and add the connection string. Here, please notice I have given the database name as API CRUD example. After that, open the program.cs file and in here, first add the API CRUD server.data namespace and Microsoft.EntityFramework core namespace in the using section. Then add builder.services.addDBContext of API DB context with options equals to options.use SQL Server of builder.configuration.get section of connection strings :db.value. And then go to the NuGet package manager and select manage NuGet packages for solutions. And here click browse and enter EF Core tools in the search box. Then from the search results, select the Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.tools. Then from the right side project selection grid, select API CRUD Server and then select the latest version. As of this recording, the latest version is 7.0.3. After that, press the install button. If you are prompted with the preview changes dialog box, then press OK. After that, click I accept in the license acceptance dialog box and wait for the package installation to complete. Then open the Package Manager console window. And in here type add-migration and leave a space and type create db within quotes and press the enter key. Then type update-database and press the enter key. Oh, errors! A connection was successfully established with the server, but then an error occurred during the login process, blah 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 blah. If you get this error, then don't worry. Till .NET 6, EF Core was not using the secured certificates, but from .NET 7 onwards, EF Core is using the secured certificates. So, to fix this error, open the appsettings.json file and add trust server certificate to true in the connection string and then save the file and close it. After that, go back to the console window and enter update-database and press enter again. Wow, this time the command executed successfully and the database is also created. Then next we need to create the customer API controller. Right click the controllers folder and then click add and select controller. After that select API from the side menu. Then select empty API controller and press the add button. Give the file name as customercontroller.cs. And then press the add button. Then after add the API CRUD Server.data namespace to the using section or in the global using section of the program.cs file. Both the ways are correct. Then add the private read-only variable of type API DB context and name it as _context. Then create the constructor method for our customer API controller and inside it set _context variable to the parameter named context. After that, let's create our first API method. It can be named simply as get or get customer. Both are correct. Here it is showing error below the toList async method. To fix this error, add the namespace Microsoft.EntityFramework Core to the using section. Notice after adding the namespace, the error got disappeared. Actually, this method will provide the list of all customers to the caller method. We will add the pagination parameters later to this method. Then let's create our next method. This method also will be named as getCustomer. But in this method, we are adding a parameter named ID of type integer. So this method will fetch the requested customer details based on the passed ID parameter. If the customer is not found, then this method will return the not found object. Not found is one of the action result type. Notice here we did not use any async keyword. So this method will execute in the synchronous way. Actually, there is not much performance differences between synchronous and asynchronous methods in the API solutions. Synchronous method will block the calling thread till the action completes, whereas the asynchronous methods will not block the calling thread. Both are right, use whichever you like. Okay, let's go to the next method. Next method is create. This method will create the customer in the database. Normally in the MVC CRUD applications, the create action methods send the control to the index page where all the customers will be listed. But in the API services, the method will return the customer object back to the caller method. I prefer this approach because in our case, the customer object comes without the ID. After creating the customer object in the database, the customer ID is auto-generated in the database table. Now we need to return this customer ID to the caller method. So it is best to return the customer object back to the caller method, since now customer ID field is filled in the customer object. Next, let's do the update method. Actually, in MVC application, we use edit action method to update the record, and there will be two edit action methods in the MVC application, one with the HTTP get verb and the other one with the HTTP post verb. But here we use the get customer method to retrieve the customer record and update method to update the customer. Since we already have the get customer method, we will only write the update method now. Notice here I have used the HTTP put verb for the update method. It is always recommended to use the put verb whenever you are doing an update action to the backend table. But we can also do the same action using the post verb. Next, let's do the delete method. For the delete method, we are using the verb HTTP delete. In the delete action, we first find the customer by the ID. If the customer is not found for the past ID, then we return the not found result. Not found is a negative or failure response. If we want, we can also pass a message inside the not found response, like incorrect customer ID or customer not found or whatever. Okay, our API server is ready. Let's build and run the API service. This is the Swagger window. Earlier we were using Postman to test our APIs, but from .NET 6 onwards, Microsoft has added the Swagger support to the ASP.NET Core API project. In case if you are wondering what is Swagger, Swagger is an open source set of rules, specifications and tools for developing and describing RESTful APIs. The Swagger framework allows developers to create interactive machine and human readable API documentation. And now click on the Get button to expand the API drop-down window. And then click the Try It Out button. This will make the Execute button and the parameters needed to call this API visible. Let's click the Execute button to test the Get Customer API method. Since there is no records in our database, it is returning empty JSON. But the response code is 200. That means there is no error in the API call. The number 200 is the success code. We will see more about the codes when we develop our API CRUD client application. Now let's close the Get Customer APIs drop-down window. Then let's check the post method, I mean the create action method. So expand the post method drop-down window. Then click the Try It Out button. After clicking the Try It Out button, the Execute button and the response body JSON window will be displayed. In the response body text area, let's fill the first name, last name, phone number and email ID properties of the JSON. Let's give the first name as Anis, that's my name, last name as Muhammad and phone number some dummy number and email ID as anis@anis.com. After filling the JSON text area, press the Execute button. Perfect. The JSON data is posted and we got the response from our API server. Let's see the response. The response code is 200. That means the method call got succeeded. Now notice the response JSON carefully. When we posted with ID as 0. But in the response JSON, the ID is showing as 1 for the customer Anis Muhammad. To understand this better, let's have a quick look on our create API methods code. See here, we are receiving the customer data without ID and then we are adding it to the database using the context.savechanges async method. After that, EF core will retrieve the ID for the created customer and will set the retrieved value to the customer object. Then the method will send back the customer object to the caller method. This is why we are able to see the ID as 1 for the newly created customer in the response JSON. Okay, let's close this create method and move on to the next method. The next method is get. Let's click this method to open the parameter window of this method. Then click the try it out button to enable the parameter window. After that, enter the ID as 1 and press the execute button to retrieve the customer with ID as 1. Perfect. The customer with ID as 1 is retrieved from the database by the getCustomer API method. So this method is also working fine. Let's close the get method window. Then after, open the put method drop-down window and click the try it out button to enable the parameters and JSON window. This method requires two parameters. First one is customer ID and the second parameter is customer JSON. So first enter the ID as 1 and then enter the JSON properties. In the JSON window, enter ID as 1, then I am changing the first name to Muhammad and the last name to Anis. Earlier first name was Anis and last name was Muhammad. Now I just change the first name to last name and the last name to first name. Then change the phone number and email ID also. Now let's press the execute button. Perfect. The update customer call is succeeded. See, we got the response code as 200. That means the call is success. Let's close the put method first. And then open the first get method. This method will list all the customers of the database. But currently we have only one customer. Let's cross check the changes done by our update method. I mean HTTP put web method. Click the try it out button. After that, click the execute button. Perfect. The method is executed successfully. Let's scroll and see the result. Notice the response JSON. The changes we made through the HTTP put method is updated successfully to the database. I mean, the first name is now changed to Muhammad and the last name is changed to Anis. Okay, now all the methods of our API server is working fine. So let's create the API Client CRUD project. That's going to be very interesting. So please don't go away. Please watch the full video. Start Visual Studio 2022 and click Create a new project. Then from the right hand project type selection grid, select ASP.NET Core Web App with Model, View and Controller. And in here, give the project name as API CRUD Client. Then set the project location as you wish or to C drive. After that, set place solution and project in the same directory checkbox to checked. Then click the next button. In here, set framework version to .NET 7.0 and leave the authentication type to none. Then leave the checkbox configure for HTTPS to checked. After that, click the create button and wait for the scaffolding task to complete. Now click the View menu and open the Solution Explorer window. Then right click the Models folder and click the Add menu and then click the New item. And in here give the file name as customer.cs and press the Add button. After that, download the API CRUD Server project from the displayed URL. Then extract and open the downloaded API CRUD Server project. After that, run the project. In case if you have not created the database for the API CRUD Server project, then run the add migration followed by update database command in the package manager console window. After that, open a browser. Then go back to the API Server project Swagger window and expand the get method drop down window. Then click the try it out button. Now click the execute button. Then from here, copy the API URL of the get method to the clipboard. Then go back to the browser and paste this URL in the address bar and press enter. Wow, now we got the response JSON from the API server. Copy the response JSON by pressing Ctrl+A followed by Ctrl+C. Then go to the API CRUD client project and here open the customer.cs file. After that, click edit and select paste special and then click the paste JSON as classes as shown. After that, delete the root object and empty customer class from the customer.cs file. Then rename the class 1 to customer. After that, add the validation attributes to the property heads so that the client-side jQuery validation will show the error spawn elements in the browser when requirements are not met. Okay, now the customer class is ready. This is how you convert your JSON classes to C# classes. Next, we will create the customer controller which will do the CRUD operations in the client side by connecting to the API server. Right click the controllers folder and then click add and select controller. Then here select MVC controller empty. After that, change the file name to customercontroller.cs and press the add button. Okay, now the customer controller is created. In here, delete the default index action which came with the scaffolding task. And then let's add our index action. Notice this action method looks like a normal index action of a CRUD application. But this method is incomplete. We need to insert an important line in the middle which will fetch the customer's list from the API server. Don't worry, we will do that in few minutes. Please wait. And next we will add the create action method. This is also incomplete and it is very similar to our normal CRUD applications create method. Then next is the details method. There is nothing new in this method to explain, so please just have a quick look on it and copy it. After that, let me paste the edit method. This is also very similar to the create action method. Currently it is incomplete, but no worries, we will complete all the methods very soon. Just you need to wait for a while. Now only the delete method is pending. Let me paste that also. Okay, now we have completed all the action methods and we are ready to inject the codes to access the API server. So let's do that. Hello all, making YouTube video takes lot of time and efforts. But all these efforts should have a meaning. So please like, comment and share this video. Thanks a lot. Let's continue to the tutorial. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon to get notified. After that, build your project. If no errors, then start creating the view files. Open the customer controller and scroll to locate the index method. Then right click on the index method. Then click add view. In here, select razor view and click add. After that, select the action template as list. Then select the model class as customer. Then press the add button and wait for the scaffolding task to complete. Okay, now the index view file is created successfully. Then scroll down to locate action links button. In here, notice the route IDs are commented. So please uncomment and set the route IDs. Then next, we will create the view file for the create action method in the same way. After that, open the create.cs HTML file and comment HTML's code of labels and text box for the ID property, because ID will be created by the API server. In the same way, let me create the view files for details, edit and delete actions, but this time I am doing it in 64x speed in the interest of time. In the edit view file, we need to do an important change in the code. That is to add the read-only attribute for the ID text box. Otherwise, user may change the value for ID property and then the API server's update method will not work. And next, let's create the view file for delete action method, also in the 64x speed. Okay, now we are done with the view files. Let's create the API gateway class. And then we need to add this class to the services collection so that it will be served by the dependency injection when needed. So open the program.cs file and add builder.services.addScope of API gateway as shown in the video. This is a very important step. If you don't add this line, then sorry, your program will not work. Okay, now go back to the API gateway.cs file and there add a private variable named URL and set the URL to your endpoint address of your API server. In real time, we need to add this to the app settings.json file, but to keep it simple, I directly hardcoded here. Then next, add an object variable of type HTTP client. We are going to use this HTTP client to connect and make calls to our API server. After that, let me paste our first API client method named as list customers. This method will retrieve all the customers from the API server. Please see the code implementation carefully and copy it correctly. This code looks complicated, but it is very easy to understand. First, we are declaring a list variable of type customer. Then we check the API endpoint URL. If it is user secured protocol, I mean HTTPS, then we need to set service point dot encryption to TLS32. When we do this, all communications happening through this socket will be encrypted. Next, we are calling the API using the getAsync method of the HTTP client object. After that, we are checking the status code of the response. If it is 200, then the call is success. If the status is success, then we will download the results to a string variable. Here we know if the call is success, then the output string will contain the collection of customers. So we deserialize the string by passing the object type as customer and collection type as list. Then we check if customer exists in the deserialized object. If it exists, then we set it to our customers list and return the customers list to the caller method. Okay, list method is done. Let's go to the customer controller and add this to the index action method. In the customer controller, first declare an object variable of type API gateway. This is the object which is going to do the all CRUD operations for our customer controller. Actually, in the normal MVC CRUD applications, we declare the DB context which will do the CRUD operations. But here, DB context resides on the API server, which we cannot see also. And next, add the constructor method with an input parameter of type API gateway. The value for this parameter will be served by the dependency injection. Then in the index method, add the line to set the customers equal to API gateway dot list customers. After that, open the layouts.cs HTML and add the menu link to access the customers module. In here, copy the menu link of home and paste it below. Then change the controller name to customer and change the menu text to customers. Okay, all set now. Let's build and run our application. Let's click the customers menu. Notice the customers list is fetched by the API client from the API server. In the right hand side, you can see the API server status window. There it shows the command executed to fetch the customers list from the database. Okay, next let's write the create customer in the API gateway.cs file. So let's stop the API CRUD client application and open the API gateway.cs file. Let me paste create customer method to the API gateway.cs file. This method is slightly different from the list customers method because in this method we are using the HTTP post web. So please listen carefully. The first two lines are same. We already seen this in the list customers method. Then in the next line, first we are serializing the customer object to the JSON string using the JSON convert.serialize object. After that, we are calling the HTTP client's post async method. Notice the parameters of the post async method carefully. The first parameter is the API URL. Then the second parameter is very important one. We are passing the JSON string inside the string content. The beauty of the string content is we can say what is in this string. I mean the string as JSON. So we say application/JSON and the encoding type is encoding.utf8. After that, we are receiving the result of the post async method and storing that in the HTTP response message object. And then we are checking the status code of response by calling the response.isSuccess status code. If it is success, then we read the JSON result from the response.client. After receiving the result, we are deserializing the result to customer object using the JSON convert.deserialize object. And then we are returning the customer object to the calling method. Actually, most of the codes are same. Only the post async method is little different from the list customers method. Otherwise, it is almost similar to the list customers method. Okay, now let's go to the customer controller to complete the create action method. Open the customer controller.cs file and locate the HTTP post create action method and add API gateway.create customer of customer. Then run the application. After that, click the customers menu and then click the create new link. In here, let's enter first name as Anil and last name as Minan. He's a nice person who taught me programming 25 years back. After that, enter some fake number and some fake email ID. Okay, we are ready. Let's click the create button. Wow, the customer data is saved successfully and customers list is displayed. Notice the commands executed in the API server status window, which is on the right side of the screen. So the create action method is also working fine in the API client and in the API server. Please note the create customer method is using the HTTP post verb. So we have seen HTTP get and HTTP post API verb so far. Only HTTP put and HTTP delete is pending. Next, we will do the details action method. To do that fast, we need to add the get customer method to the API gateway.cs file. This method is very similar to the list customers method. Only difference is this is passing the parameter ID to the API server. Otherwise, it is almost same to list customers method. And then we will go to the customer controller to complete the details action method. In here, add the line customer equals to API gateway.get customer by passing the ID. Then build and run the application and click the customer menu. After that, click the details link of the first customer. Perfect. The details action method is also working fine. So now we know how to pass the parameter to the API server using the HTTP GET verb. And next we will do the edit action method. Let's stop the API CRUD client project to go to the design view of the Visual Studio 2022. After that, open the API gateway.cs file. And in here, let me copy and paste the update customer method. This update customer method is almost similar to the create customer method. But in the create customer method, we had used the HTTP post verb. But here we are using the HTTP put verb and we are also passing the parameter to the URL. Then the next major difference is in this method we are not reading the result data. It only checks if the success status code is received. If the success code is received, then the control returns to the controller's edit action method. Otherwise, it throws the error. Okay, let's complete the edit action method of the customer controller. Open the customer controller.cs file and locate the HTTP get edit action method. And here set customer variable to API gateway.get customer of ID. Then remove the new keyword from the customer variable declaration line as that is of no use. After that, scroll to locate the HTTP post edit action method, and here call the API gateway.update customer method by passing the customer object variable to it. Please note both the edit action methods carefully and copy it. Okay, we are done with edit action methods. So let's run the application to verify it. In here, click the customers menu and then click the edit link of our first customer named Anis Mohammed, and then change the phone number. Then change the email address also. After that, press the save button. Notice that the phone number and the email address got changed. So our edit action method is also working fine. That means now we know how to access an API server using the HTTP put web also. We are almost done. Only the HTTP delete web is pending. Let's do the delete customer method. So stop the application. Then open the API gateway.cs file. After that, let me paste the delete customer method. Delete customer method is very similar to update customer method. Everything is same. The only difference is here we use the HTTP delete web, and in the update customer method we used the HTTP put web. Okay, then let's open the customer controller to complete the delete action method. Locate the HTTP get delete action method, and there remove the new keyword from the customer variable from the declaration line. Then set the customer object variable to API gateway.getCustomer of ID. Then in the HTTP delete action method, call the API gateway.delete customer method by passing the customer.id. Okay, all set. Let's run the application. Now press the customers menu. From here, let's click the Anil Menon record. Let's try to delete the Anil Menon record by pressing the delete button. Notice the record of Anil Menon is missing because it got deleted. So all the CRUD operations are working fine. Now we are able to make all calls to an API server from the MVC API client. With this, I am completing this video. Before I sign off, I request you to subscribe and share this video. I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe to this channel so that you will be notified for all of the new videos that I will be posting. Thank you and bye for now.